Extension in Merrimack County, which is the area around Concord.
Cool. Thank you for joining, all of you. Did I miss anyone on this list here who's joined us today? I think we got everyone. I'll just, a couple of other names that I'll just share who are members of this committee are Sue Cagle. She's on vacation right now. I just recently asked Gary DeZiel, I think that's how you pronounce it. He's the new Northeast Kingdom person in Vermont. He'll serve on the committee, but he couldn't make it today. Mary Peabody, who's also with UVM Extension, Lisa Chase with UVM Extension, and Laura Brown with University of Connecticut Extension. She couldn't make it today. And Penny Whitman, who is out of the country right now. So I think that's everybody on the host committee. It's not intended to be an exclusive group. And we may actually get some new members of this committee as the subcommittees begin to form, and depending on who becomes chair of those subcommittees. I thought I just would start out with just sharing the agenda just to keep us moving through this. I want to start out with just a quick overview of the conference proposal. Then I want to talk about the essential role and functions of the host committee. I kind of outlined the basic outline in front of you a minute ago. We do, because we have a really limited timeline in terms of getting a conference tagline or a theme, as well as logo, and there's some marketing to-dos that we have underway. And I think, Casey, I might lean on you to help talk about some of that too, because you're working on some of that. We've come up with a preliminary list of speaker ideas. This is just to get things started, but we'd be very interested in getting your input and ideas as well. We have developed a website, a planning site for organizing the content by the different committees, and we're using Trello. And I'll take you for a quick walkthrough of Trello so you get a sense of what that's like. And I didn't want to bombard you with that at this point, but after this meeting, I'll send you each an invite to participate in Trello to become a member of the host committee site. And if you're also on a subcommittee, we'll make sure that you get invited to that group as well. But it's a good way to organize the tasks and some of the content that we need for planning the conference. I'm not sure, I'm probably not thinking of everything, so you may have some questions or ideas or things that you want to bring up towards the end. And then lastly, I want to set some dates for future meetings. It will be good to have a regular meeting scheduled throughout the year just so we keep the ball rolling. Casey was kind enough to put together a conference list of to-do tasks, which is about 8 pages long. There's a lot of stuff on there that has to get done. Fortunately, it gets divided amongst the different subcommittees. So, but we do have a lot to work on over the next year and a half. It seems like it's a long ways out, but I guarantee you that it's not going to seem like that long when we start delving into this stuff. So I think I'll just start with the host committee function. Its main function is really to provide oversight to all aspects of the conference planning. I failed to mention that Adam Hodges is the incoming NACDEP president, and he's going to be co-chairing this conference. I reached out to him, but I haven't heard back from him, so hopefully he'll be able to join us for our next meeting. So as well, in terms of providing oversight to all aspects of the planning, the actual work groups or subcommittees that do the work, hopefully we'll have someone from this host committee either chairing or being a key member of those subcommittees. And I think there are 7 or 8 subcommittees involved, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And also, because the fundraising committee hasn't officially been formed yet, I think it's helpful to start thinking about fundraising and sponsorship early on. And I think, Brent, when I saw you in New York, one of the things that you said for many agencies and organizations, when you do your budget, you have to be thinking a year ahead
right.
for budgets. So that's something that we are going to want to talk about early on to really solicit some ideas for sponsorship so we get ahead of the curve and maybe make some asks ahead of time. So it's also the host committee's charge, since we are the Northeast, to set the conference tone, which includes coming up with a theme or a tagline, and some of the branding associated with that, promoting the conference. And one thing that has been done for some conferences that the host committee has been involved with is conference evaluation. Not every conference, I believe, has been evaluated, but I think it's it's not that difficult to create a conference evaluation. So I think it would be something that's worthwhile, so we get a sense of what worked and hopefully things that can be improved for next year's conference. So any questions about the functions or constituency of the host committee that folks have? Cool. So a minute ago, I talked about the different, the 2020 conference committees, the subcommittees. The fundraising committee is a key one. I think generally NACDEP's had success in raising about $10,000 to $15,000 a year in sponsorship from entities such as the rural regional development centers, from local organizations and entities. There's a hospitality committee, and that committee is really in charge of sort of the activities during the conference, and both during the conference and also I think some of the activities that people might partake in while they're in New Hampshire. The host committee, which is us, there's a mobile workshops committee, which is in charge of, I think it's on Tuesday of NACDEP, where half of the day is dedicated to some tours of some local sites and areas. And so there's a committee that's going to be charged with developing what those mobile workshops are. And right now, I think it's Casey and Jared have volunteered to be on that committee. The publicity and marketing committee, everything from producing a video that we can show at NACDEP 2020 and 2019 in Asheville, to assisting with some of the branding and the logo design and things like that. But I think some of that will also fall on members of the host committee too. There's a sessions committee, and Molly and Shannon and Sue Cagle are on the sessions committee currently. And that is really in charge. The charge of that committee is to really organize the conference sessions, the types of workshops, the poster sessions. Is that correct, Molly? You're on the committee currently, so. The site management committee. I haven't really thought about this one, but so there's the NACDEP association manager who is involved with a lot of the contracting and the details of the conference. And so we'll have to form a committee that's going to have to think about space usage and needs for the pre-workshops, the post-workshops, any board meetings that come up. And we'll need to convey that information to the Sheraton Harborside where the conference is going to be taking place. And then the speakers committee, which is in charge of identifying conference speakers. So a lot of committees that we have to staff and fill. I think this committee is going to populate those committees to start. But in the coming months, and particularly at the NACDEP conference in Asheville, we're going to put out a call for people to volunteer for each of these committees. Little background on the conference itself. Most of you know this, but every year the conference rotates from one region to another. And this year, or in 2020, it's the Northeast's turn. And so a year and a half ago, the call for proposals went out. And I'm not sure if, I think my colleagues and I, we decided that we had the capacity in New Hampshire to host something. I think we were the only submission for the NACDEP 2020 conference. But what we also wanted to recognize is that this is the region's conference. So while the site is Portsmouth, we want to be able to celebrate the region as a whole. So that's why we wanted to have people from other states participating on this. And there may be activities and mobile workshops also that get brought in. And so we want the region to have ownership of this conference. The venue that we're holding the conference in is in Portsmouth. It's called the Sheraton Harborside. It's probably the only venue in Portsmouth that can actually host from 150 to 250 people, which is the range and size of which this conference usually reaches. We've already booked the hotel. We have the meeting rooms booked. We're pretty much going to push it to capacity. They have capacity for about 250. I don't think we would exceed that because this is just NACDEP this year. So we're already have arrangements and contracts set with the Sheraton Harborside, but there is going to be a lot of detail that needs to be managed around that. We chose Portsmouth, obviously, because it's one of the only places in New Hampshire that has the capacity to host a conference. but we also think that it's going to be a good draw. It's got a rich history. It's one of the earliest settlements. It's seen its own form of revitalization over the last, 250 years. So it's got an interesting history. It's got a seafaring culture to it. It's on the ocean. And it's a charming and quaint place to be. And so we felt that this would be a good draw for people. I guess the drawback of that, which was mentioned when we pitched it, is that unlike some conference venues, the nearest airport's an hour away. So it's going to involve travel by bus or renting a car to get up to Portsmouth. And then even the bus station is probably 5 minutes from the conference venue, so a taxi would have to be taken. So it's not bad. And for example, in Bozeman, Montana, it was a similar situation in terms of getting to the site. We think it's very manageable, and we think that the draw of the region is going to make up for any challenges with the transportation. And then, so I think that's it with regard to the conference site. I wanted to put it out there, and we don't necessarily have to do this now, but and it's possible that not everybody on this committee is going to volunteer to be on one of the subcommittees. But what I will probably do, and save this for after, I'll put out a call to this committee to see, and I'll maybe once I invite you to the Trello site, I might put a chart in there for people to sign up or volunteer for one of these committees. And if you're willing to be a chair of a committee, even better. That would be helpful to have a chair, because the chair is technically the one that liaises with the host committee, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the chair. So, I know that Brent, for instance, because of your other obligations and duties, it's just great to have you on the host committee. You don't necessarily need to be on one of the subcommittees. And Stefan, the same, unless you would like to be. But I just wanted to throw that out there. So, let's see. One of the things that we have to nail down pretty quickly, because we're asked to put a little blurb in the NACDEP newsletter coming up in March, in a month, about the 2020 conference. And for that to happen, we need to have a tagline for the conference. So can all of you see this list of 6 taglines that have been brainstormed up here? Yep, I see
you have to read them to me.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Sorry, Jim. You're on telephone. So I'll read the taglines. Would love to, ideally, it'd be great if we could nail down a tagline here. A couple of things about taglines is it has to be pretty easy to roll off the tongue. One of the things that we were trying to do with the tagline was to, New England has a rich history, and particularly in Portsmouth that dates back, several hundred years, and and throughout history, the economy has changed from fishing and subsistence to various industries. So we want to link, sort of tie in the history and the rich history and past that this area has had, but we also want to talk about how we're adapting to change and we're innovating towards the future. So some of the conference themes that have been brainstormed, and these were just kind of submitted by different folks, including many of you who are on this host committee. Link to the past, bridge to the future. And one of the reasons why that one came up is because we were trying to think of a graphic or a logo. And one of the iconic things in Portsmouth is I think it's the Sarah Long. There are a couple of bridges that cross from Maine into New Hampshire. And so we wanted to use that bridge as a visual. So that's one, link to the past, bridge to the future. Another one was celebrating a tradition of innovation. So that ties in, the rich history that the region has, but also thinking of Portsmouth and New England as a place of innovation, where it's particularly during the Industrial Revolution and even for commercial fishing and other areas. A third one is rooted in history, growing towards the future, or growing toward the future. Fourth is embracing history, leading change. The fifth one is rich past, vibrant future. And the sixth one is rooted in tradition, leading change. And I guess, not sure if we can figure this out on this call, but I wanted to throw out there, just get your reactions or your impressions, or maybe do a quick straw poll. What do folks think about, do you have a particular tagline or theme that pops out to you? And Jim, do you have those in your head? I know you can't see them, but was there any that resonated with you in particular, Jim?
Rich past, vibrant future.
Okay, you like that because it's, what about that stuck with you?
Well, it's easy to remember,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because I didn't write these down. I just heard them. It rolls off the tongue. It speaks to the rich past of the area and the importance of the area in the past, but also is very positive, looking towards the future. A very upbeat tagline. I liked it.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't be tweaked or I didn't like the others, but that's my reaction.
Okay. Yeah.
Charlie, do you remember the one from last year by any chance? Or even this year's? Because they sounded similar, I thought.
Oh yeah. I'd have to dig into it. I'm not sure I can get to it right now, but it was something, this one is growing. Casey, do you remember what the tagline was for this conference, or Molly? It was something like growing.
It's homegrown to new heights.
Right.
Okay, homegrown to new heights. All right.
Yeah.
And the one in Cleveland was cities that, I think, communities that rock, or cities that rock. Probably communities that rock, right?
So that's nice. They all have a tie-in with their state, right?
Yeah.
I mean, North Carolina.
Yeah.
I agree with Jim. This rolls off the tongue. It doesn't have the bridge, unfortunately, in there, right? But it doesn't mean you couldn't use the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just put a sign up on the other side of the bridge here in Maine called "Welcome Home."
That's right. Yeah. We'll have to put the demarcation line between New Hampshire and Maine on it too.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for people, right? New people and our people that graduate and leave to come back.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, Charlie. Maybe you want us to vote on this, right? But I don't know. Just to move. You want closure today? I heard you saying, right?
Ideally, I would love closure today. The more we can do during the meeting and not have to carry it forward. And the question is, I want to have Laura and some of the other folks weigh in too. But it would be great if I don't know how to do this, but I guess I could just take each. I'll go through each one and sort of be thinking of which conference theme is your top theme, which you would place your vote on, and I'll go through them and we'll just do sort of yay. How many people? So, how many folks think that the link to the past, bridge to the future would be their favorite or their preferred conference theme? Okay, how about celebrating a tradition of innovation? Rooted in history, growing toward the future. Embracing history, leading change. Rich past, vibrant future. I saw some hands. Jared, I didn't see which one. Did you have one that you had picked?
I like rich past, vibrant future too.
Okay.
Got my vote, but you can't see my vote.
Okay, Jim. Yep. I sort of already counted you. So.
Oh, good.
Brent, what did you like that too, right?
That's correct.
Yep. And Stefan, I think you said that. And Molly and Shannon and Casey.
I like that one.
Okay.
Yep, I like that one too, Charlie.
What's that?
I like that one also.
Okay, that's great. That solves our problem. What I like about it. It's short and pithy, and it'll work well in a logo because it doesn't take up too much space, and it's pretty easy to remember, and it does characterize New England. So, I will share this with the rest of the committee, but it sounds like we're pretty unanimous around that. So we'll likely go with that theme. So related to the conference theme, we have to come up with a branding logo. And we had someone in our office play with some ideas. And again, what I'm going to present to you is really rough, and we may decide that we want to go in a completely different direction. But I'll show a couple of different iterations or ideas that, and you can react to them. One thought was to do sort of a block print. This would have to be cleaned up, and the lines would have to be made cleaner if we were to go with this theme. someone thought about making a block print with Portsmouth in the background, but showing the bridge. There's a boat in this one. We'd probably make it more iconic of a tugboat, since that's what most people think of when they think about the commerce in Portsmouth. And so this is just kind of a rough, super preliminary sketch. It's got the Old North Church in the background and some buildings that represent Strawberry Bank, the settlement. So this is one idea. Kind of got mixed impressions from folks about this idea of doing just a black and white block print. And I guess knowing that we're going to have to clean this up and professionalize a little bit, what are some of your thoughts about going with a block print idea or logo? What do folks think about that? Would it be helpful actually to share the second thought first? Maybe I'll go back to this one. The second one was we were looking at pictures that were iconic of Portsmouth. And one of the pictures that came up was the top one with the 3 tugboats, Bow Street, which is one of the historic parts of the town. And then I don't even know what bridge this is in the background, but it's one of the 3 bridges that crosses into Maine. And then the bottom is sort of a pixelized graphic that was created from that. It could certainly be simplified. So the second thought or idea was to draw from this picture and create some sort of very stylized or simple conference logo from that. So what do folks think? Do you like this, at least where this block print concept is leading? Or do you think elements of this second option, or is there another thing that you think would be more effective? And just one thing to consider is we need white space, typically in the left-hand side, bottom and top, for the NACDEP conference in the theme, and then the dates and the venue below it. So reactions? You can say you don't like it. We're just trying to throw stuff out there, since we have technically the logo. We have a little bit more time to do this. We do need to get the blurb out and need to know what the tagline is, I think, by March. But I think the logo doesn't really get introduced until after the Asheville conference. But we do want to get a head start on it, and we may or may not end up hiring a professional graphic artist. So. Who would certainly provide best practices and come up with a design that's more professionalized, I think. But do folks have a leaning, or do you think we need to go in another direction? What input do you have for where we're headed with this logo?
Charlie, I was just going to say, I like the stylized photo idea. I mean, it seems like it's got a lot of the similar elements as the other design does. And
Yep.
I'm no Photoshop master, but I'd be willing to bet that there's a filter that kind of looks like you're trying to get to,
Yep.
with the block print. I bet there's something like that.
Yeah.
So start with that photo.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we were doing, is we were trying to at least come up with a conceptual that we could hand off to someone who has graphic ability to actually take this and turn it into maybe a block print style. But in terms of structure and content of what's in it, okay, so you sort of like at least the theme that the current one that it's showing has manifest in it?
Yeah, I like that one.
Okay.
Charlie, I think so. So I think so too. And maybe you could even do both. You could do sort of a stylized version of this graphic, but then have the picture itself somewhere else in the brochure.
Okay.
So that the theme would be repeated. But I think it's good to show the water, the tugboats and the backdrop there.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah.
So I can't see it. I can't see it, Charlie. But does it tie in with the logo or the tagline?
It does.
The tagline that we at least talked about. I mean, does it? When you look at it, does it speak to this rich past, vibrant future tagline?
I feel that it does. I mean, it shows the historic part of Portsmouth and the old bridge. But I guess others might have thoughts too. Others, do you think it ties into the past, the rich past? I think folks are saying yes. So yeah.
Good. Okay.
And Jim,
I think
and the tugboats are sort of classic. I don't know what period they're from, but they're definitely historic it's an icon of Portsmouth too that ties to the history. So
Got it. Okay.
Shipping in the commerce that happens here. So all right. So
that's great.
Yeah. So I think we'll have to figure out how we want to go about designing the logo based on this conceptual piece. But it will likely, as Kristen said, it'll be something a lot more simplified and stylized than this. But this is sort of the theme that the graphic person would be borrowing from. So, okay, awesome, thank you. So we, a few folks had shared some thoughts on who some speakers would be. So I think traditionally there are at least two major speakers, in some cases 3 major speakers that would be presenting at NACDEP. One would be the keynote speaker. Sometimes in the middle of the conference there's a lunchtime speaker that's invited in, and then there would be a cap note speaker. And that might entail people who are known nationally as well as some local figures. And I think we want to have a mix of that if we had 3 speakers, et cetera. For major speakers. One name that was thrown out there is Bruce Katz, and he wrote he's the author of The New Localism. I think he worked for Brookings Institution, but I don't think he's currently with them. But he's done written a lot of books on innovation, community change, changing cities. So he's pretty well known. Others might know, but he may be affiliated with MIT as well, or may have had an affiliation with MIT at one point. So I don't know. So that's one idea. Chuck Fluharty, he's the director of RUPRI, the Rural Policy Research Institute. He recently gave a presentation to the New Hampshire Association of Counties, and he does a really nice session on reviving rural America. And he points out that really the term rural is a myth, and it's really more of a continuum. But he's speaking primarily to, so what we liked about that is that it's not just rural, it's incorporating the continuum between urban and rural. Jerry Ann, I think it's Bogus, is the director of the Black Heritage Trail. And I think she was featured on a public New Hampshire public television series, and she's just a very well-spoken person and can speak a lot to the Black Heritage Trail in Portsmouth, and she's very well, at least locally known. And then there's Ed McMahon, who is the former Scenic America president. He's given a TED Talk, and he talks about the importance of place and explores why our physical surroundings are worth caring about. So. This is just a preliminary list of names to throw out there. I think we're going to probably want to collect more ideas. So I guess the first question is, are there names that come to the top of your head that you think, thinking about the theme of history, tradition, change, and innovation, are there names that come to mind that you could think about that maybe particularly affiliated with the Northeast? So what do you think about the ones that are thrown out here? Thinking about past presenters that NACDEP has had, are these in line with what you've experienced at NACDEP? What do you folks think? Do you like the list so far? I see heads nodding, so Shannon?
Charlie, I've never been to NACDEP, so I couldn't to that piece, but I'm looking forward to my first one this summer in Asheville. But I do really like the idea of having the director of the Black Heritage Trail do a talk. I think that's, it's something that people could then visit also in Portsmouth. It's very close to the hotel. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't heard her speak, but I think it sounds like a great fit.
Yeah, and I think she would be likely, if she's available on that date, we could probably get her to come speak for us, or it would be a high likelihood. So I think that would be an interesting one, just given that aspect of Portsmouth history. So, and it represents diversity and a lot of the issues that we nationally in Extension are trying to tackle and work through. So I do think that would be one that we should consider anyway. And then the others. So what we can do is, I'll post this list of proposed speakers. There is a speaker committee, and I think what our job will really be is to simply generate or populate a list of speaker ideas that can go to that speaker committee. I don't think it's the host committee's job to decide on it, but it is a role that we can play in terms of populating what that list is of potential speakers, and then letting them select the speaker, which may entail a survey or some way of reaching out to NACDEP constituents to get feedback on that.
Charlie,
I have a question about the speakers too. Do we have a budget for stipend, or I don't know how that works?
Yeah, so basically based on the revenues that come in through NACDEP, and there is a reserve fund that's always there, so a lot of it would be paid forward or et cetera. There is a budget for speakers. I don't know exactly what that budget is. I know in the past that, some speakers have actually been a couple $1,000s to get to NACDEP. So there is a budget. I don't know how it works specifically. So Brent, you had a question?
yeah, one of the things that I've been promoting the last couple of years is to see about an opportunity, and maybe it doesn't fit with the plenary in terms of the fit with the region, but to get NIFA's director to NACDEP. I don't know, it hasn't happened during my time in this role, and I think it would be one way to solidify the director's understanding of the importance of CED as one of the extension functions. And since we got a new director who just really is getting his feet under him, J. Scott Engel, that I would like to invite him in some fashion to be there, to have an opportunity to see the breadth of the work that's underway, and more importantly, for him to take back then the importance of CED when we're having these discussions around budget and priorities, so that we don't continue to get lost behind 4-H or A&R or FCS. So I just, and again, I understand in terms of the role of a plenary speaker, really, you want somebody dynamic and all, but if there's a opportunity somewhere, welcome to get him involved. I would really love to see that happen.
Yeah, so I think that would be a great idea, and I shouldn't have limited it to say that there's only 2 or 3. I know there's a keynote and a cap note, and I think about the conference in Bozeman. There were actually multiple speakers that gave different lunchtime talks during the day. So so by all means, if that's something that you could probe with the NIFA director to see if that's a possibility.
Yeah, with this much advance notice, certainly I think it would be viable, again, based on his schedule.
Okay.
And we're still, Stefan's on the call, the regional directors, so we had a meeting planned that got canceled during the furlough with him. So we're still trying to get before him. Most of the funding that comes through the federal budget line supports the regional centers, and having him as a champion of that is important to us and to CED writ large.
Yeah, that would be a great opportunity for people in the national extension system to interact and hear the perspective too. So I think that would be fantastic. So can you over the coming months, can you probe into that and see?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And
I think what we might do is right now we're trying to get a rescheduled meeting with the regional directors, myself and Dr. Engel, and then that could be one of the things that again Stefan from the Northeast region could bring as a initial invitation. It's hard to say no in person if you got a meeting, you know what I mean?
All right.
Stefan, is that you willing to do that?
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. I certainly am.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. That sounds good. And just taking this note down.
Well, and Dr. Engel is from the Northeast, for what it's worth. He's from Maryland, actually.
Yep. And his parents still live outside the Baltimore area.
Oh, good.
At one point, he was the experiment station director at UMD. So. Okay,
so he's very familiar with extension then, having been an experiment station director. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Maryland has a community development presence, but.
This was about 20 years ago now, 15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that they did at the time, Charlie. You may be right. but certainly, I don't know, in Georgia, he might not have been exposed to it too much either, but he was on my board of directors, actually, when I came in at the center. So he knows about the regional centers, at least.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Perfect. So again, I will create some sort of a table for speaker ideas, and we'll post it. I'll add, I'll highlight Jerry Ann, because I think she's someone that we'd really like to get to speak at this conference, and maybe we can reach out to her sooner than later. And then I'll add Jay Scott Engel to the list too, and then others can add names too. So.
Yeah, Charlie, this is Brent. One more. I can't remember the individual's name who's Sea Grant, but it did remind me, it's been a couple, 3 years since we've had a federal panel at NACDEP. So again, not necessarily for a plenary session, but maybe it fits better in the session topics, but a federal government panel, EPA, NOAA, USDA as appropriate, EDA, others potentially that are invested in this area or have federal investments that they can provide.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for them to bring what they're thinking in terms of strategic priorities, where they're trending, and then again to have those opportunities to interact if we've got existing programs in the region that are funded by them to potentially give them the upfront illustration of the work that's underway.
Okay, and do the panelists usually come from the regional offices?
It depends. That can be one option. And again, if we've got a NOAA Sea Grant person and a NOAA representative there from the region, that seems like probably the best option. If it's a headquarters related person, because we're here in the DC area, it's going to be a lot easier to get us there.
Okay.
Potentially if we go out to Bozeman or elsewhere.
That sounds good. That sounds great. Perfect. So definitely I'll include that as an option too, or something to consider for the speakers committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just another thought quickly, Brent, you reminded me of the libraries person that we met with a few.
Institute of Museum and Library Services.
Yeah, that's not, is she a Fed? Was she a Fed or not?
They're quasi.
Quasi, okay. Something along the lines, and I mean, Charlie, your work that you've done on arts and creative thing, I don't know if that's something you want to revisit as one theme, but that's something that Chuck Fluharty would speak to as well, I think.
Yeah, I guess Molly, not to put you on the spot, but I think that's a topic that you've been looking at, arts in the creative economy, and I think to some extent Shannon as well and others. What do you folks think about exploring options around arts in the creative economy?
Yeah, I was thinking as we were talking that I'd like to just do a scope across the country of who's kind of leading those discussions right now and making presentations. Mm-hmm. And also there seems to be more and more people talking about rural America in a different way. And I can't put any name to that, but I feel like I keep reading posts about that and social media and whatnot. And so I'm happy to, sort of do a scoping of who's out there and throw some folks on the list. Particularly thinking about being very forward thinking, and kind of dramatic, like, what's really got to change. Because I know, as someone said earlier, Maine and New Hampshire, we're really struggling with, we've got to do things different because we're losing our young people.
Yep, definitely. Yeah.
So just on that, and not to bring up the FCS too much, but the intergenerational angle might be interesting too. And in fact, that would kind of speak to your rich past and vibrant future theme.
Mm.
There are folks at, at Penn State, like Matt Kaplan, who's looking at how to engage elderly, to keep, to keep youth in the community, and also how that ties in with art. And that might be maybe a track or something of that sort, or even maybe something for a speaker.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why when we bring up these discussions during the host committee call, that invariably some of you will go on, and Molly and Shannon and Sue will go on to the sessions committee. So that's a consideration to bring back to the sessions committee in terms of what topics we might want to really frame it around. And Shannon reminded me too, going back to the federal panel idea of that the national Sea Grant Director is the former New Hampshire Sea Grant Director, Jonathan Pennock. So he would be someone who still has connections in New Hampshire, and we know him pretty well. So he might be someone that we could coax to come back to New Hampshire. So.
Good.
Charlie, the other thought I had, although maybe you've thought about this and decided no, is doesn't Robert Putnam live in New Hampshire or New England?
He does, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, he's nationally recognized for his work, so just wondering about him.
Yeah.
Jaffrey, New Hampshire.
Is it Jaffrey?
Yep.
Yeah.
I've called him there once before. But he usually hides there to write.
Yes,
he's based in New England.
Is he a good speaker?
I don't know. I haven't seen him speak.
Yeah.
I love his writing.
Yeah.
You talking about the social capital, Robert Putnam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I know his speech that he gave in was it Helsinki, where he got the award. Has a lot of citations, but I haven't seen him speak either. Probably we could find a video of him online.
Yeah, that would be good.
He would be good for this topic, right? If it's a community and so forth. Yeah,
and it's only an hour and something minute drive to get here, so we could. We know some people that know him well, so we can maybe leverage them to get to
nice. Huh.
But again, I think a lot of this will be the speaker committee, which hopefully some of you will be leading to work through the details of this. And we can start populating that list. So, well, thank you. This is a good start, and I'll expand this list here. And Casey and Jared, I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but one of the tasks and one of the key attractions of NACDEP is to have a series of mobile workshops on the afternoon, potentially a full day one. I think in some cases they do a full day mobile workshop. And just here included some thoughts or some ideas of things that we could do in Portsmouth. And Jim, since you're on the are you still there, Jim?
I am.
Okay, just some of the thoughts, since you can't see this, are a Strawberry Bank walking tour. And Strawberry Bank is one of the first colonial settlements dating back to the 1600s, I believe. A local food and brew tour. Portsmouth was listed as one of the best food cities, small food cities in the country. An arts and culture tour. There are a number of arts organizations, 3S and the music hall. There's a pretty vibrant arts sector in Portsmouth. A New England fishing heritage tour, which is kind of sad because we've lost most of our fishing heritage, or
yeah.
The rest of it's in restaurants, but not necessarily in the boats. There's still a few fishing boats, but aquaculture is sort of the newest innovation or iteration of the fishing industry. And we actually have an offshore aquaculture site probably 2 miles from Portsmouth that we have someone that could potentially lead a tour to that. Coastal adaptation to climate change tour. Portsmouth livable city tour. Portsmouth has done a lot with new urbanism, compact design. A historic harbor cruise, I think, would be popular. It'd probably be pretty costly, but there are some different options, including taking an old bungalow. An Isles of Shoals tour. There's a steamship that runs out to the Isles of Shoals, and I think UNH is partly vested in that tour. A sea kayak tour. There's an outfitter in Little Harbor, which is a couple miles from Portsmouth. Comeback City tour, which might take people to other cities and towns around Portsmouth. But I guess I would think about, Kristen, you're just over the bridge in Maine, and so you probably have some ideas for a tour or two that could take place in Maine.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know how many are generally offered? Yeah, and actually I was going to let Casey, I think you've got a pretty good sense of how the tours get vetted, and you had some ideas for how we can query input on the tours. But Casey, I'll let you speak to that, because I think you've been part of the mobile workshop committee, the current one, and you probably have more of a sense than I do on that. Can you speak to that a little bit, Casey?
Sure, yeah, and Jared, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
Jared's been on those calls as well. I think I get the sense that there's about 8 tours normally, and there's be a mix of kind of educational tours, relating to CED work, and then some just pure fun tours. So the sea kayaking tour would fit in well. A mix of tours that have a fee and some that don't. And I think Jared and I are really looking to build this list out to include other areas beyond Portsmouth, because we are in such close proximity to other cities and amenities in New England. Something that was done at last year's conference was the North Carolina folks brought, I think, 16 ideas for tours to the conference, and then people were able to vote on those, and that's how they narrowed down to those 8 tours. So that's something we'd also like to do for the aspect.
Good idea.
We also had an idea to do kind of an online survey in the NACDEP newsletter as another way to get people to vote on the top tours.
Anyway, Charlie, yes, I have ideas, and maybe it makes sense for me to join the mobile workshop committee.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, so Casey and Jared, you now have 3 people on your committee. So
Thanks, Kristen.
Great. I guess I'll move on to the next thing. So we have been just locally, just to get things kicked off, we've been using a site called Trello, which is a free website that you can allow anyone access to as a way of organizing the conference. And so I'm going to send each of you an invite to become members of Trello. But basically, I'm not going to walk you through it here because it's pretty self-explanatory. When you get to the view that you'll get is really more, it'll have little blocks which show the committee of the different committees that you're part of when you go to your opening page. And then when you click on a committee, this is the host committee. This is kind of how we've structured it. We have a list of to-do items. And if you click on any of these items under the to-do items, you have a date that you can have a due date. And once that item is completed, you can move it to completed. So you can actually move these little pieces around. You can add files. You can have a descriptor. So when you click on each of these, it expands it out into a dialog box with all of the content and information in that, and even a sub list of to-dos and things, who's doing what. So you can really add all of that in one nice panel that's, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It does take a few minutes to sort of orient your way around this, but it's pretty much drag and drop and click and add. So I think it's pretty intuitive. So our thought is to use this as the way to organize the different committees. So would folks be willing to try and learn this? I don't know what sorts of restrictions other institutions have in terms of using sites like this. I know some federal entities aren't able to access things like this, but would you be willing to give this a try?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does it require a password, Charlie?
No,
Okay.
I don't, actually, I can't remember. I signed up so long ago that I think what happens is the manager of the overall site of all the committees sends an invite, and then that individual gets a link and they have to click click on that invite, and that gives them access to the Trello. But I don't remember. Does anyone recall if you actually had to set up a password? Shannon says you did. Yeah. So, okay.
What's giving it a shot anyway?
Yeah. Yep. But I just, on my computer, I don't even enter the password anymore. It just automatically opens up. So I guess when you open it up for the first time, hopefully your computer will say, do you want to save this password?
Okay.
And so it's not, only people with that email address can access it. So that have been invited. So I don't think there's a huge security worry about it. But, so I think once you're in and set up that password, then it's pretty easy to get back in. So we'll use that. After we populate the different committees with people, we'll then, I'll give you all access today to the host committee. And then as we populate the committees, you might get another invite for one of the other. Each committee is essentially a board. I don't know why they use the term board, but yeah, perfect. I know we're coming down to the end of our hour. I guess this is time for ideas, questions, or issues that you want to bring up. Is there anything that you see as missing or that we want to talk about today? We will talk about a next meeting date, or at least how to set the next meeting date. But are there other things that folks want to bring up or talk about? Okay. Sounds like we've got to start anyway. And on the host committee, I will will attach the list of to-do items, which gives an overview of all the moving parts that have to happen in a general timeline when each of those happens. So when you're invited to the host committee board, you'll be able to click on that and see just see what the full scope of all the things that have to happen is. In terms of next meeting date, I can't remember if I had said that we would do it monthly or bi-monthly. I think my fear is that because we're coming to summer in just a few months, if we did it bi-monthly, we'd only have 1 or 2 meetings. And I don't think there's so much that we have to do that I think my preference would be to start out as monthly. And which we probably won't, but if we get to a point where we don't need monthly meetings, then we can always change that. But would folks be open to having monthly meetings?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Do you want to calendarize a date, or do we want to set the date at each of the meetings? What's your preference?
I just assume set it now.
Okay. Yeah. And do we want to have, I guess, so we can set it now for our next meeting, and do we want to have our meetings on the same day and time every month, or do we want to mix it up because everyone has different schedules? Do folks have a preference? Is it easier for you if we pick the same date every month, assuming we can find one?
And Charlie, just wondering how many people are not on this call that we should,
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 people, 5 people who are not on this call. So, and some of them I can actually see on our calendar. So I might be able to do that. Do we want to see if we can set our next meeting date and hopefully it works for the others now? All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and going to where is this? Okay, I'm trying to get my calendar to pop up, but for some reason it's not working. So.
Hey, Charlie, I have to get off on another call just in a minute.
Okay, thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Does
See you, Stefan.
Yep, take
all
care.
right, thank you, Stefan. Does do folks, if I just start throwing out some dates, would folks react to them to see if they're available for you? And if we can't come to a resolution here, that's okay. I think we want to look. So we're looking into March. And first of all, are afternoons or mornings better, or does it depend on the day? What would you prefer? What about Friday, March 8th? How does that look on folks' calendars?
Yeah, works for me, Charlie. Maybe at not at 2 o'clock, but maybe 1 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah, fine with me, Jim.
I could do 1 o'clock. I can't do 3.
I can do 1. Brent.
1 works for me too. It's Kristen.
Okay.
Me too, Charlie.
Okay.
1.
Me too. 1 o'clock.
Awesome. Did anyone say that March 8th wouldn't work for you? Wow, that was a lucky stab in
That's
the
amazing.
Maybe the second Friday of every month, something like that.
So what I'll do is when we send this note out to, okay, so let me ask now, with the second Friday of the month, knowing that we can't all necessarily make every meeting, would the second Friday of the month in the afternoon work for folks?
Good.
Looks good here.
Yeah.
This is too
It's
easy.
a miracle, Charlie.
I know.
Boy.
I can't believe that. I will try. I'll query the other folks too. We will set the next meeting date as March 8th, and I think folks said 1 p.m. And on that email with a couple other things I'll share, we'll see if the second Friday, if we can calendarize this as a regular standing meeting. And would 1 p.m. be best for folks? So
Good.
Sounds good.
excellent. All right. Well, thank all of you for joining this host committee, and I'm excited. We've got a lot of work ahead, but it's going to be really fun to have the conference in New England. So, in the Northeast, I should say. Sorry. So, excellent. All right. Well, if I don't see you before then, we'll see you on March 8th at 1 p.m.
All right.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Charlie. Thanks to all the team for all your work.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye all.
Thanks, everyone. Nice seeing you all.
Thank you, Shannon.